All Souls Unitarian Universalist Church, building community, inspiring growth, creating change. Here in the heart of Kansas City, we come together to create this hour of shared reflection so that we might be renewed in courage for these times and inspired to lives of greater dignity, higher purpose, deeper generosity, and more effective action. If you are new to Unitarian Universalism or to our congregation, we want to get to know you and share a part of your journey. If this place is already your spiritual home, welcome back. We need one another, and it is good to be together again. We are so excited to be together in person again after almost 2 years of gathering only online during the coronavirus pandemic. Nevertheless, through the gifts of technology, we continue to celebrate community and connections with each other online also, as we lean into the values of justice, compassion, and reason. Together, we learn the love that has the power to overcome both loneliness in the heart and oppression in the world. Welcome to our service this morning. May the words and music and images that we offer today nourish our best selves, calling forth abundant wisdom and love.
Good morning, and welcome to our shared reflection on the spring equinox, which arrived just a few moments ago at about 10:30. But don't worry if you missed it. This marks just the beginning of what may be the most ancient holiday in all human cultures, the celebration of the Persian New Year, or Nowruz. As we shall see, this festival is both earth-based and profoundly cultural. It is intertwined with the long-standing Arabic love of poetry, among other traditions. This morning we will explore the age-old heritage of Nowruz and of poetic mysticism in the Persian world. I invite you to lay down for a moment your burdens and distress for all the heartbreak unfolding around our globe today. We must have our source deeply grounded in the beauty and the love that the poets tell us point to the divine if we are to be useful to those who suffer. Our spirits must be nurtured in joy and generosity. As the Unitarian poet John Greenleaf Whittier once wrote, "If thou of fortune art bereft, and in thy store there be but left 2 loaves, sell one, and with the dole buy hyacinths to feed thy soul." Nowruz envisions the year as ending and beginning with the spring equinox, when life and growth return with the expanding light. It features many representations of the 4 elements on the decorated table, which is its symbolic center in the family, and a work of folk art, much like the Western Christmas tree. And so we begin our observance by placing the first items on our table, as we call the 4 directions with some of the most familiar of Arabic poetry, from the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam, as rendered in English by Edward Fitzgerald.
Drives night along with them from heaven, and strikes the Sultan's turret with a shaft of light. As we rejoice in the sunrise and fresh breeze of the east, let us awaken with the spring to the light of a new year.
Come, fill the cup, and in the fire of spring, your winter garment of repentance fling. The bird of time has but a little way to flutter, and the bird is on the wing. As we celebrate the daylight and the nurturing rain of the south, let us fill the cup of a new year with the sweet beauty of life.
The moving finger writes, and having writ, moves on, nor all thy piety nor wit shall lure it back to cancel half a line, nor all thy tears wash a word of it. As we enjoy the fiery sunset of the west, let us write the pages of a new year without regret.
I sent my soul through the invisible, some letter of that afterlife to spell, and by my soul returned to me and answered, I myself am heaven and hell. As we welcome the starlight of the north, let us make this new year, as much as we can, a shared heaven here on earth.
Ah, love, could you and I with fate conspire to grasp this sorry scheme of things entire? Would we not shatter it to bits and then remold it nearer to the heart's desire? As we kindle this chalice of memory and promise, let us rededicate ourselves to the human heart's longing for beauty, peace, justice, and love, so that we may indeed conspire to make the shattered world whole. I invite those at home to continue the tradition of sharing in the chat where your chalice is lighted this morning. And I invite Lynisa to come remind us how to sign along with this little light.
If you would, please stand, and we'll have to face this way so we can watch Lynisa and learn our signs.
Good morning.
Good morning.
We're going to start by reviewing our signs very quickly. For the sign shine, we're going to actually do it several different ways. The first way is just like this, the little light shining. The second way is with two hands. And the third way, we're going to do the same hand sight, but kind of step back and make it big. And then there's two more ways. Touch, wiggle out, touch, wiggle out both hands. For this little light of mine, we're going to simply sign candle. Your non-dominant hand does the wiggling, your dominant hand is pointing to it. The next verse talks about going places. Everywhere I go, I'm going to let it shine. So we're going to go places three different ways. We're going to walk. We're going to move around in a vehicle with wheels. It could be a bike or a car or a scooter. It's this hand shape, and just move it any way you want to go, up a hill, down a hill, around a corner. And finally, we're going to fly around the world. It's this hand shape, which also means I love you. And we're going to take our two planes and we're just going to fly them over. For the third verse, we only need 2 new signs. The first one is for building up our world. We're simply going to sign connect, and we're going to turn it around, swirl it around. So it's this hand shape. They meet together, and they swirl around. The second sign is world. Again, matching hand shapes, both W's. Your non-dominant hand is your base. Your dominant hand rests on top and goes around. I'm going to stem back so it can be clear. All right, ready to give it a try? All right.
This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Building up a world, I'm gonna let it shine. Building up a world, I'm gonna let it shine. Building up a world, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.
I think we're starting to get that one, huh? Let's join together now in our words of covenant. You can be seated, that's fine. Sorry to be unclear. Together we affirm goodwill is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. Now we get to sing with the assistance of our choir. Yay! So let's stand up and give it a shot.
The ceaseless flow of endless time, no one can check or stay. We view the past with no regret, nor future with dismay. The present slips into the past and dream like melts away. The breaking of tomorrow's dawn begins a new day. The past and future ever meet in the eternal now, to make each day a thing complete shall be our New Year vow.
The holiday of Nowruz appears to date back more than 3,000 years to the pre-Islamic and even pre-biblical traditions of Zoroastrian religion in the ancient Near East. It has many aspects, including special seasonal foods, buying or making new clothes, and picnicking outdoors for the first time since autumn. The Western tradition of Easter eggs, which has no logical connection to Jesus, probably originates with the exchange of colored eggs as New Year gifts that has long been part of Nowruz. Today, the holiday is observed by Iranians as well as Kurds, by Zoroastrians, Sufis, Ismailis, Alevis, Alawites, Babis, Baha'is, and many of the brave folks in Crimea and in immigrant communities elsewhere throughout the world. There are many local variations in the heritage of Nowruz celebrations, but one common element is the decorated table of spring, also called the Hafsen table. It contains a variety of symbolic elements to remind everyone of what may help us to start the year off well. Hafsen literally means 7 S's, and there are quite a few of the table items that begin with the letter S in Persian. But several of the traditional objects don't. They are meaningful because of what they represent. The mirror, for instance, which Chuck brought up, stands for spiritual reflection and self-awareness. We should always strive to know ourselves more accurately and deeply. The light of reflection also lifts up the element of air through which it travels. The goldfish represents life and progress. Traditionally, a live goldfish was displayed in a bowl on the Hafsen table, and later released into a local stream where, in many climates, it quickly died. Current practice is changing in many areas where Nowruz is celebrated today. An artful toy or a jeweled goldfish is becoming more usual. It brings the element of water and reminds us that we are bound together with all creatures in the web of life. Candles are a symbol of enlightenment and inner wisdom, the light that helps to dispel ignorance and offer guidance. They lift up the element of fire and the flame that can kindle another flame without losing anything of itself. Tulips, an early spring flower, bring color and beauty from the element of earth. Now we'll go on with some of the other elements. A book is the emblem of inherited wisdom. It can be scriptures like the Quran or other spiritual texts. But since we know that Nowruz was celebrated long before either Islam or the Quran existed, it doesn't have to be scripture. The book of wisdom can be classic poetry, which we will hear more about in a few minutes. Decorated eggs, as in Western culture, are a sign of fertility and new life, as well as generosity. They are round like the earth, and there are a variety of traditions according to which they may be decorated with symbolic signs. The traditional 7 S's are foods that were eaten or used in preparing special dishes for the holiday. They include sabza, which are growing sprouts of wheat or grass, the symbol of rebirth and growth. Thank you. My lovely assistants are doing a good job of figuring out which thing I need next. Samanu is a sweet wheat pudding decorated with almonds. It symbolizes hospitality and the pleasure of having guests and friends. Seer is garlic. It is the symbol of medicine and the hope for health in the coming year. Sirke is vinegar, a common ingredient in Persian cooking, and the symbol of patience because it is fermented. Sebe is the apple, a symbol of beauty for its red color and its beautiful form as well as flavor. Senjed is the dried or brined fruit of the oleander plant, sometimes called Russian olives, and its sweetness is the symbol of love. Sumac is the spice derived from the dried and ground berries of the edible sumac shrub native to Turkey. Its colorful red-orange dye in food symbolizes the sunrise of a new day. An additional S is sunball, or the hyacinth flower, the symbol of spring's arrival, cherished for its delightful scent. Another is seke, which are coins, and as in many cultures, the symbol of prosperity and abundant wealth. Finally, Sa'at is a clock, the symbol of time, to measure happy hours for the year to come. The half-cent table is an artfully arranged collection of beautiful things that are meant to remind the viewer of both the beauty of spring and the possibilities of new life and a new year, blessed with health, wisdom, friendship, prosperity, and happiness. With those wishes, we send the children who are with us to their classes, accompanied by song. There is an interesting tradition associated with the mystical poetry of the Persian culture at Nowruz. The technical name for it is divination by text. One of the reasons for having a volume of poetry by Rumi or Hafez on the half-cent table is that you can receive an omen by opening the book at random and letting your eye fall without intention on a random verse. That arbitrary couplet or quatrain becomes a forecast or theme for your year ahead, a message from the divine beyond, which you, of course, must discern how to apply to your particular situation. It is, if you like, a somewhat more elegant version of a fortune cookie. We will talk some more presently about the nature of this poetry and why it lends itself well to this kind of practice, as well as why it is particularly challenging to translate effectively. I was quite frustrated by this difficulty because I wanted to offer us the opportunity to experience this divination process for ourselves. But all the English versions of these classic poets were either incoherently literal, unhappily tortured into Western rhyme, or else primarily the creation of the translator rather than anything the original poet ever really said. And obviously none of these verses would have the sense of familiarity and authority for us that they do for native Farsi speakers who have known them all their lives. Then it occurred to me, We have our very own mystical, oracular, epigrammatic sages in this tradition. Emerson, for instance, works perfectly for this purpose. So, as we now receive this morning's offering in support of the work of this congregation, I invite you, once the basket has passed you, to come forward and observe close up the beauty of our half-sun table and select from this bowl a quotation from the Unitarian sage of Concord. As you return to your seat, sit with these words for a few moments and consider what wisdom they might hold right now for your life and your future. It may not be the start of a new year for us, but it's a new season of gathering warmth and light. What might these classic words portend for your challenges and gratitude, your work and love, your inner life and deepening wisdom in the new days to come? We will not interrupt your reflection with words of dedication this morning, but we ask now once again for your sustaining generosity as the offering is gratefully received.
supreme Persian poet of love was erased by Omid Safi. Persians take poetry seriously. For many, it is their singular contribution to world civilization. What the Greeks are to philosophy, Persians are to poetry. And in the great pantheon of Persian poetry, where Hafez, Rumi, Saadi, Attar, Nizami, Ferdowsi might be the immortals, there is perhaps none whose mastery of the Persian language is as refined as that of Hafez. So it is heartbreaking to have to tell people, time after time, that the Persian mystical poems that they have come to love so much and that are so ubiquitous on the internet are forgeries, fake, made up. No relationship to the original poetry of the beloved and popular Sufi, Hafez of Shiraz. How did this come to be? How can it be that about 99.9% of the quotes and poems attributed to one of the most popular and influential of all the Persian poets and Muslim sages, one who is seen as a member of the pantheon of universal spirituality on the internet, are fake? It turns out that it's a fascinating story of Western exotification and appropriation of Muslim spirituality.
Let's take a look at some of these quotes attributed to Hafez. Even after all this time, the sun never says to the earth, "You owe me." Look what happens with a love like that. It lights up the whole sky. You like that one from Hafez? Too bad. Fake Hafez. Your heart and my heart are very, very old friends. Like that one from Hafez too? Also fake Hafez. Fear is like this cheapest room in the house. I would like to see you living in better conditions. Beautiful, but again, not Hafez. And the next one you were going to ask about, also fake. I wish I could show you when you are lonely or in darkness the astonishing light of your own being. That's good stuff. Powerful. So yes, the poetry is mystical and it is great poetry. The problem is Hafez of Shiraz said nothing like that. Daniel Ladinsky of St. Louis did.
So where do all these fake Hafez quotes come from? An American poet named Daniel Ladinsky has been publishing books under the name of the famed Persian poet Hafez for more than 20 years. These books have become bestsellers. You're likely to find them on the shelves of your local bookstore under the Sufism section, alongside books of Rumi, Khalil Gibran, Idris Shah, and others. I know many people love these Hafez translations. They're beautiful poetry in English and do contain some profound wisdom. Yet if you love a tradition, you have to speak the truth. Ladinsky's translations have no earthly connection to what the historical Hafez of Shiraz, the 14th century Persian sage, ever said.
He's making it up. Ladinsky himself admitted that his verses are not translations or accurate, and in fact denied having any knowledge of Persian. Ladinsky claims that Hafez appeared to him in a dream and handed him the English translations he is publishing. Quote, "About 6 months into this work, I had an astounding dream in which I saw Hafez as an infinite fountaining sun. I saw him as God, who sang hundreds of lines of his poetry to me in English, asking me to give that message to my artists and seekers." End quote. It's not my place to argue with people and their dreams, but I am fairly certain that this is not how translation works.
I want to give credit where credit is due. I do like Ladinsky's poetry, And it does contain mystical insights. Some of the statements that Ladinsky attributes to Hafez are, in fact, mystical truths that we hear from many different mystics. And he is indeed a gifted poet. Many of the poems are quite beautiful. They are just not Hafez.
Ladinsky's translations have been passed on by Oprah, by the BBC, and others. Government officials have used them on occasions where they have wanted to include Persian speakers and Iranians. It is now part of the spiritual wisdom of the East, shared in Western circles, which is great for Ladinsky, but we're missing the chance to hear from the actual, real Hafiz, and that is a shame.
Almond trees renewed in bloom, do they not proclaim? Life returning year by year, love that will remain. Almond blossom, sign of life, in the face of pain. This is hope in people's hearts. Spring has come again. War destroys 1,000-fold. Hatred scars the earth. On the day when almonds bloom is a time of birth. Friends give thanks for almond blooms swaying in the wind. Token that the gift of life triumphs in the end.
What we have here is another case of the internet ruins everything. It was going to be all about Hafez, those lovely, delicious little aphorisms that turn conventional spirituality upside down and challenge the soul to consult its own experience. They're all over Facebook, so Emersonian. You know, so Whitman-esque in their rejection of secondhand wisdom. But come to find out, as Omid Safi explains, none of that is really Hafez. It's all Daniel Ladinsky, a contemporary American disciple of Meir Baba, who lives on a farm in the Missouri Ozarks and does not understand Farsi or any dialect of Persian. Ladinsky, who was baptized by his Catholic mother and educated in his father's Jewish tradition, became a follower of the Eastern sage Baba during his young adulthood and spent time at Baba's teaching centers both in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, and in Mehrabad, India. Meir Baba, an early 20th century mystic and spiritual leader, drew upon both Sufi traditions and the ancient wisdom of Zoroastrianism in which he was raised. In the 1990s, Ladinsky, who had read the British colonial officer Henry Wilberforce Clark's translations of Persian mystic poetry, began publishing his own renderings of Hafez, claiming to have received them from the original poet in a dream. This is quite the rabbit hole, which I promise not to take you all the way down. But stay with me here. There's a moral at the end of the story, I promise. The American poet Daniel Ladinsky was following two established literary traditions. The first goes all the way back to the Hebrew prophets and before. It is called pseudonymous authorship. It is the practice of an unknown author seeking to add to the luster of an established and possibly dead writer or teacher, and to claim credibility for their own original work by attributing it to the better-known figure. This is why we have at least 3 distinct prophet Isaiahs in the one book of Jewish scripture. The subsequent writers sought to make the original more clearly relevant to later historical circumstances, as well as to take on the mantle of his authority. It is a peculiarity of post-Enlightenment Western culture that we consider originality to be a virtue and plagiarism or misappropriation of authorship to be a deep intellectual crime. Other ages and cultures understood this matter somewhat differently. The second tradition in which Ladinsky clearly stands is one originated at the turn of the 20th century, most prominently by the Lebanese-American author Khalil Gibran, whose best-loved work in English entitled The Prophet was published in 1923. Gibran, who had no extensive formal education either in his native Lebanon or the America to which his family emigrated when he was 13, wrote somewhat awkwardly in both Arabic and English. He was aware of the canon of classic Arabian poetry going back to the pre-Islamic Bedouin heritage, but he was not trained in its highly structured forms and conventions. His style was more simple and direct, reflecting the romantic idealism and symbolism of Art Nouveau. And his Arabic writing was received as a welcome innovation by the émigré community of which he was part in the US. Now, his work in English has often been dismissed by critics, but it was and remains enormously popular. Most of his books have never been out of print since their publication. This literary style, which might be called romantic Arabic-English fusion, is clearly where Ladinsky's Hafez-attributed poetry also stands. As for Hafez's authentic writings, the challenges of effective translation are almost insurmountable, and I would submit that no one has actually surmounted them yet. There's a principle in Islam that no one who does not understand Arabic can actually know the Quran. Its original language is integral to the revelation and cannot be fully accessed in any other tongue. To learn Islam, one must learn its language. Anything else is necessarily an interpretation. And in fact, most English translations of the Quran bear the title Interpretation of the Holy Quran in order to affirm this. This is even more true of the intricately structured verse forms of the Sufi poets like Hafez. Imagine trying to translate a crossword puzzle into even another Western language like Spanish or French. You would have to do violence either to the words themselves or to their relationship in the layout. And if the puzzle as a whole contained a quotation, as they sometimes do, what would be left of the meaning of that layer? Even if one abandons the disciplines of meter and rhyme scheme, vocabulary itself and word order are not commensurate from one language to another. A word-for-word rendering of the opening lines of one of Hafez's most well-known poems gives us, from Farsi to English, something like this. Ho, O pass sake round bowl cup, and bestow what love seemed first but happened difficulties. Which is not coherent, let alone poetic. This can be made into a properly constructed English sentence such as, Ho, O sake, pass around and offer the bowl, for love at first appeared easy, but difficulties occurred. From this, one translator has offered an English rhyme, Arise, O cupbearer, rise and bring to lips that are thirsting the bowl they praise, for it seemed that love was an easy thing, but my feet have fallen on difficult ways. The rhyme scheme of the ghazal, Hafez's most frequent form, is as intricate as the sonnet, and some part of its implications of eternal divine wisdom lies in the impact of seeming inevitability created by the sense that the final line could not have been otherwise because the ear demands it. Another aspect of that format divides the poem into freestanding segments, each a separate thought united by the rhyme, which makes it inherently epigrammatic, like a series of proverbs. This is the quality that makes it so inviting for use as a divination tool for the coming year. Each verse contains a complete, suggestive nugget of an idea that stands on its own, easy to quote, easy to remember. Yet the poem as a whole depends upon the ways in which the independent verses also reflect and echo each other, both in the rhyme and in thought or mood. They need each other. For the poetic conventions they contain each alone offer a single sketch, but only in conversation with each other does the fully dimensional image emerge. And these conventions include the desire for wine, the metaphor of intoxication for both human love and the desire for divine wisdom and connection. Unrequited romantic love as a symbol of human finitude and sadness that retains a hope of fulfillment and has its own pleasure in contemplation of inaccessible beauty. Mortality and grief as inevitable fate which cannot be avoided or overcome, but which are the only stage upon which love, joy, wisdom, and beauty can unfold. The friendship of fellow drinkers and sufferers, and hospitality as a shared human condition and the source of compassion. Folly as the inescapable mirror image of wisdom, and the puncturing of pomp and pretension as a necessary precondition for true self-understanding. And the quest for the divine presence, in which all self-consciousness dissolves and pure connection is realized as sacred bliss for one eternal moment, which never endures, leaving the human spirit ever longing for more. When each of these metaphors is expressed in one of the series of rhyming stanzas, they build to a sense of inevitability and cosmic truth, which leaves the reader poised between the polarities of the divine reality is everywhere, how can we miss it? And what the heck, let's have another cup of wine. The Sufi mystic lives with one foot in each of these truths, incapable of fully abandoning either their prayer or their wine cup, longing to transcend ordinary reality and to be drunk, and never perfectly sure whether there is actually any difference between the two. Nowruz is a holiday about getting your ducks in a row, cleaning the house, getting some new clothes, paying your social obligations of hospitality, starting the new year with a fresh slate. It's all very sensible and joyful, as I understand it. But there's also a little corner of sympathy for the mystic's dilemma, a recognition that these old school poets were not only the masters of verbal pyrotechnics, but also knew something about grief and craziness and longing that is essential for the appreciation of both beauty and wisdom. Spring is like that too. It is a time of birthing that may or may not end well, a time of planting seeds that may or may not yield a harvest, a time of pollination that may or may not bring forth fruit. The world vibrates with energy and beauty works overtime, but tragedy too often follows close behind. Shall we be prostrate with the loveliness of it all, intoxicated with gratitude for the gathering light? Or shall we remember wars and plagues and turn our faces to the wall at the sheer cruelty of human fate and finitude? Either way, another cup of wine is in order, calls the poet. The American writer Edna St. Vincent Millay captured this sentiment in a verse which I think Hafez might have been right at home with. To what purpose, April, do you return again? Beauty is not enough. You can no longer quiet me with the redness of little leaves opening stickily. I know what I know. The sun is hot on my neck as I observe the spikes of the crocus. The smell of the earth is good. It is apparent there is no death. But what does that signify? Not only underground are the brains of men eaten by maggots. Life in itself is nothing, an empty cup, a flight of uncarpeted stairs. It is not enough that yearly down this hill, April comes like an idiot babbling and strewing flowers. She's right, of course, they all are. The skeptic mystics who do not trust God 1 inch and cannot escape God wherever they turn. The garden is another one of their metaphors, that meeting place between human intention and nature's implacable energy, where beauty and death walk hand in hand like star-crossed lovers. It is spring in the garden. The aroma of the hyacinths is everywhere. What can you do but surrender to beauty and let your heart be broken yet again? The sun has come to its balance point. The year begins once more whether we are cheering it on or not. What is there to gain by withholding our assent? The celebration of Nowruz has itself become an act of political resistance, where either religious fundamentalism has sought to eradicate it as pagan, or where secular totalitarianism has tried to wipe it out as a form of ethnic rebellion. But the people remember, and so does the earth. And the 7 S's make their appearance, even if only subtly. What are you going to do, arrest me for a splash of vinegar? Nowruz Piruz, they say in such places. May the new day bring victory over every kind of tyranny and of persecution. After all, there is no stopping the earth in its journey around the sun. There's no stopping the lengthening of spring days. You can't keep the poet out of the wine shop or make the human spirit stop yearning for love and beauty or grieving over all that is lost as the seasons change and pass. So have a new outfit and an apple. Spring is here again. Have a couple of lines of Hafez if you know him, or some other handy sage, and pause for a moment to consider how your life might unfold in this newborn year. Get outside as the air grows softer. Smell the hyacinths. They will be dust before you can inhale again. Greet nature and one another in joy. It is what we do as human beings, what we have always done, 3,000 years now and counting. Set forth the table of spring and welcome all that renews and inspires us, all that makes us wise and happy and good. Cultivate the garden of your own heart and mind. Appreciate the garden that surrounds us here on planet Earth. Admire the mystery of the egg, the sprouting grass, the watery dazzle of darting fish. Each a piece of the marvelous whole, like the verses of a poem. The light of spring rises again here in the garden of the earth. Rejoice. Let's rise and sing. Sending the light of truth, the warmth of community, and the fire of commitment out into the world. And these we also carry in our minds and hearts until we are together again. On this day of balance between day and night, may we, creatures of the earth and stars, find our balance within to live wisely with justice, integrity, and compassion. May the year to come be blessed with prosperity, health, and happiness, with freedom and peace for all the world. Nowruz Piruz. May the new day bring triumph of all that is good, and may you walk in growing light.